Dweller in the Abyss, Demon of Dispersion, the last voice before transcendence. He's encountered at the edge of everything you think you are. He is chaos given shape, and shape collapsing back into chaos. Those who meet him return changed. Some don't return at all. If you too dwell in the Abyss, check out Pantheon, our brand inspired by myths, legends and folklore. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Link in the description. Buried in the journals of John Dee is a name: Choronzon. Dee was a mathematician, alchemist and court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I. In the 1580s he began working with Edward Kelly, a scryer who claimed to receive visions through a polished obsidian mirror. Together they documented what they believed was a divine language, Enoian, delivered by angelic intelligences during their ritual sessions. Enoian was structured and systematic. It included a full alphabet, syntax, invocations and names of entities organized into hierarchies. Dee believed it was the original language spoken by angels, and it could be used to make direct contact with celestials. Over several years they compiled a vast volume of material. Most of the names recorded had clearly defined roles within the cosmology. They were linked to elemental forces, planetary influences, or specific heavens. The language was consistent and detailed, with cross-referenced tables and layered meanings. Choronzon. He did not fit. His name appears briefly, without description. No associated function, no mention of alignment, purpose, or origin. He isn't categorized among the angelic or demonic beings that populate the rest of Dee's work. There is no ritual for summoning him, no seal for controlling him, and no explanation for why his name appears at all. This is highly unusual. In a framework built entirely around precision and spiritual taxonomy, a name without context stands out. It suggests something unaccounted for, something outside the structure being built. Dee and Kelly. They moved on, but the name remained in the record. Later interpretations would attach significance to it, but in Dee's original writing, Choronzon is simply there. A single name that breaks from the rest of the pattern. Choronzon is tied to the abyss, a rupture in the occult understanding of consciousness where the self begins to disintegrate. Within the esoteric map known as the Tree of Life, the soul is said to ascend through 10 levels of awareness, the Sephiroth, each one reflecting a more refined aspect of existence. The lower spheres deal with the familiar, emotion, memory, will, thought, while the uppermost ones are said to be entirely beyond the individual self. These higher states are reached only by letting go of everything one thinks they are. But between the two regions lies a void. The abyss. This is where he waits. At the center is a point called Daath. It appears to belong to the map, but it isn't counted among the 10 Sephiroth. Some describe it as a false step, a trap that mimics enlightenment, but leads only to collapse. Daath is associated with knowledge, but not the kind that elevates. It reveals rather than guides. It exposes the self without preparing it, and when a person stands at this threshold, halfway between the lower and higher realities, Choronzon becomes active. He is the result of crossing into Daath with any trace of ego still intact. His role is to tear apart whatever the individual is still clinging to. If there's pride, it gets magnified. If there's fear, it becomes overwhelming. If the person believes they've achieved something, he flatters them into complacency, then strips it away. He is the process of mental and spiritual fragmentation. What happens when the ego encounters a space where it can no longer define itself? His power is in reflection. He reflects back every fractured thought, every contradiction, every unacknowledged fear, and he does it all at once. There is no center in Daath, no stability. Choronzon uses that to unravel the mind from the inside out. For those who attempt to reach higher consciousness, Choronzon is the final test, a trial of emptiness. Only a self that has fully dissolved can cross the abyss and remain whole. He welcomes your arrival. He opens the path, but once you believe you've succeeded, that's when he begins. He's what you face when you confuse glimpses of awakening for full transcendence, when you carry identity, status, or control into a realm where those things lose all meaning. Unlike other demons, Choronzon cannot be exorcised. There is no ritual that banishes him, no mantra that silences him. Once encountered, he leaves a mark. Even those who pass through him and reach the other side are changed. The idea of a solid self becomes difficult to return to. He is what happens when you go too far, too fast. When you attempt to leap into spiritual heights without collapsing everything false within you. Choronzon reveals who was never ready to begin with. In December 1909, Aleister Crowley and his companion Victor Neuburg stood at the edge of the Algerian desert with a singular purpose: to summon Choronzon and cross the abyss. Crowley, who styled himself as the prophet of a new age, believed that spiritual enlightenment demanded confrontation with the limits of the self. They travelled to the remote part of the desert near Bou Saada, far from interruption because the ritual required complete control. Crowley drew the triangle of manifestation into the sand and marked the circle of protection where Neuburg would stand as scribe and guardian. The names of divine powers were inscribed around him. Within the triangle, Crowley positioned himself as the bait. He would serve as the medium, the vessel through which Choronzon would be given voice. Then they began. According to Crowley's own account, Choronzon emerged quickly and violently through the voice, Crowley's own voice, twisted and accelerated. He spoke in riddles, lies, and flattery. He offered truth wrapped in deception, deception wrapped in certainty. At first, he tried seduction, presenting visions of power and dominion. Then he turned to mockery, questioning Neuburg's courage, insulting his intelligence, and probing for psychological cracks. The entity never remained still. Choronzon shifted shape constantly. A woman, a warrior, a scholar, a beast, each form a reflection of the ego's last defense mechanisms, a living collapse of coherence. Crowley became agitated. At one point, Choronzon physically lunged from the triangle toward Neuburg. The line between hallucination and real danger was blurred. But Neuburg reacted instinctively, using the ritual dagger to reinforce the protective circle. He held the space together while Crowley collapsed, muttering, sweating, writhing in the dust. The ritual reached its endpoint in absolute silence. Voices fell quiet as the working came to a close. Choronzon remained until will, body, and mind had reached their limit. Crowley and Neuburg endured him in full, and the record that survived describes strain, exhaustion, and the sense of something far larger pressing against them. Crowley later framed the operation as a breakthrough, claiming passage across the abyss and the grade of Magister Templi. The aftermath told of a harsher story. Neuburg's stability eroded over the years that followed, and Crowley revisited the encounter repeatedly in his writings, each time with the tone of a man who sensed unfinished business. Choronzon exposes the seeker to every fragment of self that resists surrender. The desert released their bodies. The experience remained. In the ritual that summoned Choronzon, every line, every word, every gesture was deliberate. Without it, the thing they sought to contact would spill through and consume everything, and so the design began with geometry. The triangle of manifestation, also known as the triangle of art, was inscribed into the desert sand. It wasn't arbitrary. The triangle, a cage, a shape used to give form to the formless, is where the spirit is meant to appear, bound by the triangle's points. The summoner never enters this space. They stand in the circle, outside it. The names of divine intelligences are written around it to reinforce its barrier. Break the circle, and the boundary fails. Everything in the ritual served the same purpose, to hold Choronzon in place just long enough to confront him. There is no tool that binds him entirely. He's always slipping out of form. His very nature is dispersion. The triangle can only ever temporarily stabilize him, forcing him into coherence just long enough for the ritual to take place. He's concentrated. Containment doesn't mean control. Choronzon has no stable identity. No single image defines him. He appears as what matters to you. He takes the shape of the unresolved, the desirable, the believable. In every documented encounter, he adapts, the collapse of all fixed meaning. This lack of form is strategy. He presents himself through illusions tailored to the psyche of the observer. To one, they may seem like a mentor or spiritual guide. To another, he arrives as a seducer, a voice of love or reassurance. In other cases, he's appeared as a serpent, a divine child, or even the aspirant's own reflection. Each appearance is crafted to infiltrate. Power is gained by presenting what the seeker wants to see, just long enough to draw them deeper into confusion. What makes him truly dangerous is the intent behind it. Choronzon's forms are weapons of distraction. They are believable, comforting, even revelatory. Partial truths, echoes of real memories or emotions. But none of them are whole. Every form he takes serves to fragment attention, to turn the focus outward, to prevent you from facing the internal collapse required to cross the abyss. Redirection, a way of anchoring the ego in something that feels familiar when the ego should be dissolving. In thelemic terms, this is the final trap. Choronzon offers visions of progress. He offers a shortcut. He simulates success. He mimics enlightenment. Those who accept his forms without dismantling the parts of themselves that crave them are the ones who fail. What Choronzon exposes is the need for illusion. That need is what keeps you from crossing. That need is what he speaks through. Crowley described him as the maker of all form. He produces the appearance of reality. He offers containment where there should be collapse, structure where there should be release, form where there should be formlessness. That is the essence of the encounter. You confront everything in yourself that demands things remain fixed, definable, safe. And if that part of you still holds on, Choronzon doesn't need to destroy you. He just keeps you there, circling your illusions, until you do it yourself. Crowley wrote that Choronzon is dispersion given a voice, but his deeper warning was that Choronzon speaks through the part of the mind that refuses to let go. He isn't the destroyer of the ego, but its final expression. Every structure the individual has built around identity, purpose, progress, and enlightenment is gathered here, at the edge of the abyss, and Choronzon uses those structures as his medium. He draws from you your own convictions and repeats them with perfect accuracy. The danger lies in how familiar that voice sounds. The ego has one instinct above all others: to continue. Even when the path demands dissolution, even when crossing requires the abandonment of every claim to selfhood, the ego asserts itself. It says, "I understand." It says, "I am ready." It says, "I have achieved this." These statements feel like alignment and confidence, but they are symptoms of attachment. He reinforces them. He amplifies the certainty that should have been surrendered long before the aspirant reached this threshold. This is why the abyss is described as the place where false enlightenment flourishes. A person may mistake insight for transformation. They may confuse intellectual understanding with spiritual annihilation. They may believe that the collapse of identity is something they can oversee, manage, or direct. He presents every remaining fragment of selfhood as proof of progress. He encourages you to step forward while carrying everything they were meant to abandon. He offers clarity that feels profound, but leads nowhere. He allows you to believe that they have crossed when they have not even begun. In this state, you confront yourself magnified, multiplied, fragmented. Choronzon reveals the parts of the ego that resist dissolution, the parts that seek continuity, the parts that claim, "I am." even when that claim prevents any genuine assent. His influence is ordered, precise, and entirely constructed from the person who stands before him. The discrepancy between what you think you've become and what you truly are becomes the substance of the encounter. This is why he is feared. Choronzon shatters the psyche through agreement. He feeds certainty into the very places where uncertainty was required. He turns confidence into confinement and turns spiritual ambition into a closed loop. Nothing in his presence forces collapse. The collapse comes from your insistence on holding together. By confirming the lie that says, I am, Choronzon prevents you from dissolving into what lies beyond. Choronzon is no longer summoned with blood. He's logged in. The collapse he once brought in the desert now unfolds in every timeline, thread, and feed. There is now recursion. Where there was once the abyss, there is now the algorithm. Choronzon has migrated to a condition. He thrives where the boundary between signal and noise is eroded, where attention is fragmented across 1,000 tabs, and where the selfhood is curated by engagement metrics and hollow affirmations. This is dispersion in its purest form. In the age of the digital ego, he only needs to convince you that you are whole. And that's easy, because you're already saying it. I am awakened. I am sovereign. I am the main character. The screen reflects them back with likes, shares, and manufactured resonance. Spiritual pride has never been easier to access. Enlightenment has never been easier to fake. What Crowley described as the final obstacle to transcendence is now a personality brand. He appears as you. When you mistake attention for ascension, he appears as the unearned certainty that your path is complete, your awakening is real, and your insight is unique. He appears every time transformation is mimicked instead of lived. Choronzon is a presence you become. He is what's left when the silence deepens and no self answers back. When thought no longer tracks and every reflection lies. He is what waits when there's nothing left to guard. The echo of your last certainty, stretching into the void, hoping something answers. Nothing does. That's when you realize. He didn't speak. You did.